So once again, welcome to the Windham Southeast School District Board regular meeting, June 8th, 2021. We know the meeting has been warned properly, and I have a couple of changes, actually communications and little adjustments to the agenda. The first is Tim Maciel has a resolution we received from BDCC in support of a Ethiopian refugee program that is being broadly promoted in the area. We'll do that under new business a little later in the evening. I also would like to shift the administrative reports and do the ESSER update first. Since Deb Cardane is here, we can start with that one. And also an announcement that we had hoped next week or next meeting on the 22nd to have the teacher leaders from the Diversity and Equity Committee program and the staff come to the meeting and basically sum up their year and show us sort of evidence and examples of the progress that they've made. And a number of them have done some videos and some preparations for that. I thought it through, but I'm not well enough to recognize that July 22nd is well after school has ended for all of our staff. And because of the nature of the experience this year, I think it's fair to say it would be cruel to ask people to come in a week later and talk about their experience. So I'd like to move that to the first agenda. We'll open the season next year in September with a presentation from the Teacher Leaders and Diversity Equity Committee. And I think Michaela would like to address that. Michaela?
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks, Dave, and thanks to Andy for noticing that. Yeah, I just want to appreciate Shannon Kelly for making the video and know that in September, we won't have 5 of our teacher leaders with us who've done a lot of great work this year, so that they're leaving the district. And so I just wanted to name them and appreciate all the work that the staff, the faculty, and the administrators have done to continue the work for equity and social justice. And so that's Erica Garnett, that's Kylie Weld, Corey Sorensen, Elise Wadsworth, and Jess Montanari are all leaving. And I just want to appreciate them and thank them for all that they've done. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michaela. Wendy, I think you probably would like Michaela to send you those names.
Bingo. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Could you do that, please, Michaela? Just email them to Wendy Levy at WSESDVT.org. It'll come, if you type in Wendy, it'll come right up.
Got it.
Thank you. Okay. So on to the consent agenda. We have a clerk's report, approval of minutes from May 25th, and we have warrants of May 10th to 2021 of $188,385.53. Warrants for May 17th of $227,319.18. Warrants of May 24th of $207,650.90. And payrolls from May 7th of $1,253,536.06. And payrolls of May 21st of $1,451,385.85. We also have new hires. Linda Alvarez from the Career Center, Kimberly Edgar for BUHS, Torrin Riddle for Putney Central, and Nicole Thomas of Dummerston. And we have a couple of other changes I have to get up here. Your patience for a moment. We have resignations of Ellen Bowles from Oak Grove, the music teacher, and Julie Ackerman-Hovis, the Green Street music teacher. And Julie Ackerman-Hovis will be moving to BUHS and become the choral teacher. So those are the personnel changes. We have a couple of additional leadership council appointments, and we'll take those up when we get to the leadership council. So if I could please have a motion to approve the consent agenda and the warrants of May 10th May 17th, May 24th, and payrolls of May 7th and May 21st, and recognizing the new hires and retirements.
So moved.
Thank you, Sean. A second?
Seconded, Thomas.
Thank you, Thomas. Moved and seconded to accept the clerk's report and the warrants as presented. All those in favor, please indicate by unmuting and saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? It appears all are in favor and none opposed, so the consent agenda and the warrants are approved. And on to the public comment on non-agenda items. This is a period in the meeting where we set aside time for people who have questions or comments, particularly comments, because if they're questions, we probably can't answer them because we haven't had time to prepare or think about what the question is. But 10 minutes to identify issues that people have in mind. And then when they, if possible, we can try to respond to them. And if not, and there needs to be more time spent, then at the end of the meeting, we will have additional time for public comment. So at this time, are there any comments on non-agenda items, things that are not going to be talked about or acted on this evening? I don't see any hands up. I'm hoping everyone knows how to use the raise your hand function. So, okay, we will proceed. Next is administrative report. I believe Deb Cardane and I think Frank may have an update on ESSER as well. So Deb, could you go ahead? Tell us how the public comment process is going.
Happily. Thanks, David. I'm really happy for this opportunity to provide you with an update of our recovery planning. At this point, we have submitted a draft of our plan to the state as of June 1st, but we do remain committed to gathering and applying stakeholder feedback as much as possible across the coming year and as our plan continues to develop and be revised. Plan as it exists right now is very much a starting point. I want to emphasize that. We've developed goals and activities, and they should absolutely be considered the beginning of our collaborative design work, not an end product. Before sharing some of the steps we've taken so far for collecting feedback, I want to make sure we're aware of the nature of collecting feedback. Feedback should occur in a loop, and it should be a recursive cycle. And I want to convey that this is really our goal. So gathering feedback takes time, it takes space, it takes time to clearly compile information so that it's consumable by stakeholders. I know you all know that. It requires space for stakeholders to consider those ideas, weigh in, and work to build ideas that are specific to their families and students' needs. Space for us all to engage in meaningful discourse around the emerging ideas, and time to compile, synthesize, and thoughtfully apply the feedback in a meaningful way. So as you're well aware, we've had very little time and space in this process, both in relation to the deadline from the Agency of Ed and in relation to the energy teachers, families, and our community have as we close out this school year. This work would have normally taken at least an entire year, and we have been at it for about 3 months. So although we've already submitted our plan, we're very committed to continuing to include our stakeholders' feedback in our planning and implementation process across the whole year as a recursive and cyclical process. So tonight I'm going to share a few of the steps that we've taken to integrate stakeholder feedback and a few that are in the works. Please keep in mind, even these steps will continue to grow and develop as we move through the year. First thing I want to share with you is a website that has been created. This is currently under review by our recovery advisory team. David, can I share my screen?
Yes, let me push the button. Sorry. You should be able to do it. Go ahead.
All right, let me try again. And let's see. Yep, there it is. So a quick preview of the website. Can you see it? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the beginning of how we would convey this information to the community. There's a quick overview of the pillars that we talked about the last time we were here: social emotional learning, engagement and truancy, academic achievement. There's a quick summary of the planning process, also what we went over last meeting. And then the rest of it is really organized by our goals. So we're really working to make this information accessible. Broad goals: social emotional learning, mental health, well-being, information around the results of our needs assessments, our goals here, and then the activities that accompany those goals. Goal to increase our competencies of self-management, engagement, and self-efficacy. We actually changed once we looked more closely at the data. So this is an example. This draft will continue to develop. Increase the number of students who report positive perception of their overall social and emotional learning climate of their school, and then activities that accompany that. Engagement and truancy, similar format. Our needs, our goal, the activities that will support that goal. Same thing with academic achievement and success. At the bottom of this website, there are links to the complete draft of our recovery plan, the presentation that I shared with you last week, or that Paul and I shared with you last week, as well as the Vermont AOE COVID resource page, and then a link to a survey. And so this is all being looked at right now by our recovery advisory team that includes stakeholders from a variety of roles, and they are providing us feedback, so there will be adjustments. And once we have complete results from our community, we'll be able to sort them and utilize them in a way that we can pass it to the relevant people that would apply that feedback. So that's those two things, website and survey. And we have also initiated school-based planning. So each school is currently working with seed money to begin planning for building level activities. And this work includes their leadership councils and their leadership teams. We're establishing a staff advisory group, and there'll be a team of teachers who are going to weigh in on curriculum decisions across the year, including those that will relate directly to the implementation of our recovery plan. We've also passed out a staff PD survey, a survey that this has gone to the staff to provide them with an opportunity for weighing in on decisions around professional development for next year. So those are the 5 things we've done so far. We're going to continue to add steps. That's where we're at this moment. And as our plans continue to evolve and grow, we're going to need this time and space to get the work done. We're still developing our systems that are new within constraints that are continuing to change pretty much by the week. And we're just coming to the end of an entire year of this. So gathering, reflecting on, applying data, including feedback remain a high priority throughout the year. And we know an open and collaborative process is going to lead us to stronger outcomes. So we absolutely look forward to working as closely as possible with our staff and our community as we continue to develop these plans. So that's what I have to say about the recovery plan. We could pause for questions. Paul's here to talk more about the funding aspect of things.
Well, Tim does have a question, and so we'll start with questions and then go on to the next area. So Tim, go ahead.
Okay, there are some new people to the visiting this board meeting. So Deb, could you just in a nutshell explain what the stakes are, how much money we're dealing with?
I'm sorry, David?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I think I'm going to just pause you, Tim, because I think you're going to get that information directly from Paul.
Okay.
That's our next plan.
Any other questions from the board? Let me, I do have one, Deb, are those websites posted prominently on the district board, or are you distributing them through a network, or have you connected with the Communications Council to help distribute that information?
Oh, great idea, David. Thanks. These are the kinds of ideas I look forward to gathering from each other. Right now it's under review by the advisory team, and they're giving feedback probably by the next week. I would assume we would be sending it out as widely as possible, definitely before the last day of school. So maybe by the end of this week.
Great.
Yeah.
Good, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't see other questions, so maybe we could hear from Paul.
Sure. So Deb just laid out the WSESU recovery plan. That is a requirement from the Vermont Department of Education. In addition to that, there are some requirements associated with the federal component and U.S. Department of Education, excuse me, component of the funding piece. And Tim, in response to your request, The response to the pandemic, the support coming out of the U.S. Department of Education happens in three segments. One was the so-called ESSER 1, and ESSER is elementary and secondary school emergency relief. And ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 have already come out. The ESSER 3 grant is, for all intents and purposes, not yet available. ESSER 1 was for approximately $1 million. ESSER 2 for approximately $4 million. ESSER 3 is for $9.5 million. The first two ESSER grants didn't come with a requirement to provide a specific plan for use of the funds, activities associated with using the funds. But our assumption and our sort of modus operandi going forward has been we want to use those funds because they are targeted. In fact, all three ESSER funds are targeted at responding to the pandemic. We want to use those funds as part of our recovery plan. It doesn't make sense to have a recovery plan and then do a bunch of other things with the money. It really makes sense to keep those in parallel as much as possible. The ESSER 3 grant, the largest of the three, does require that a plan for use of the funds, the activities, be put up on the district website and allow for public comment. Additionally, and probably more importantly, it does require that there be meaningful consultation with some specific groups that the legislation, the guidance from U.S. Department of Ed provides. That guidance, those groups include students, teachers, representatives from groups, advocacy groups for students with disabilities, LGBTQ students, low-income students, homeless migrant students, a whole list. And so the next step for us, and this we sort of laid out a bunch of this at the meeting last time, for us is to engage in that meaningful consultation. And we are up against a deadline because additionally, the U.S. Department of Education said you have to create that plan and post it within 90 days of receiving the first your ESSER 3 grant. In order to make things work, the Vermont Department of Education asked all the districts to start the ESSER 3 application, but not put in any specific activities. That was for in order for them to access the funds from the federal government, but it meant that a 90-day window started. That 90-day window runs from May 24 to August 24. And in that time, we need to engage in meaningful consultation. So the plan is to identify those groups, start meeting with those groups, start holding some public forums, gathering information. By and large, we're going to try and gather survey level data from, associating the website that has been created with the, sort of making those apparent at the meetings and gathering the information that way. And I will say one more thing. We've already started that process, acknowledging that students are no longer going to be available after Monday. We have arranged to meet with a high school student council in order to do that one of the first pieces of the meaningful consultation. And if I could be allowed to share my screen,
I think you have access.
Okay, I will go over sort of what the process is. So this is, by and large, this might be something that we would present to stakeholder groups as part of our summary, as part of our meaningful consultation with the groups. The recovery plan pillars that Deb referred to, that's for the Vermont AOE recovery plan. They identified 3 areas that we needed to do planning around: social emotional learning, mental health and well-being, engagement and truancy, academic achievement and success. And those were all covered in the last board meeting. And Deb has provided additional information and is also available on the website. Broadly speaking, these are the needs we identified. in response to the pandemic, and that was the direction from the Agency of Education. We've identified a decrease in student engagement, both in terms of class participation and attendance, indicating a need for additional family outreach and support, engaging learning opportunities, support for more inclusive instructional practices, including social emotional learning. SEL is social emotional learning. So one broad area of need is that engagement, and both with students and with families, to re-engage students in the learning process. We've also identified ongoing gaps in student performance on large-scale assessments for historically underserved populations. I've come to this board and other boards back when we were a bunch of different boards, talking about the so-called achievement gap, the difference in, say, large-scale assessment scores for students from low SES backgrounds versus students not from low SES backgrounds. That gap, and that's one of the historically underserved populations. That's the kind of gap that we've been talking about for quite a while, and we continue to talk about, and we sort of want to address here. Identified ongoing gaps in student performance, including a need for more inclusive instructional practices, addressing issues of diversity and inclusion. So part of the work with teachers and with students is to address those issues with respect to diversity and inclusion. We identified, in order to meet the requirements of the Vermont Department of Education, there are sort of there's what are called SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals that we need to create for the plan. These are the goals that we created. You should really see them as those are indicators of broad work, but we're specifying a specific index in order to get a sense of the measurement of the progress of our work. 10% increase in teacher ratings of students, social emotional learning competencies of self-management, engagement, and self-efficacy. Those are that was part of the new learning that we had from the Panorama surveys. Our Spring 22 Panorama Student Climate Survey, it will indicate a 10% increase in the number of students who report a positive perception of overall social, emotional learning climate of their school. Again, a piece we've just recently done that survey. That's new information for us. The number of students absent 15 days or more will decrease by 20% over the 2020-21 data. We saw a huge increase in the number of that level of absences, 15 days or more, from prior years as a result of the pandemic and issues associated with that. And by June 2020, gap in academic performance of students in underserved populations will decrease, including graduation rate and failure rate. So that's the sort of very brief summary of the recovery plan that we would provide to stakeholders. And then we've also started the process, and this is absolutely just a start, of identifying groups, stakeholder groups in those categories identified by the federal government, that we would want to make sure they were contacted and had an opportunity to specifically respond with respect to the areas of concern that they are advocacy groups for. And this is, I'm not going to read them all, but you can see essentially what I did was look in a bunch of directories for nonprofits and advocacy groups in the area and start finding the ones that would have, relevant things to say about our plan for use of the funds. And the idea is to contact those stakeholder groups, let them know that we're going to be having public forums to present this information, to talk about it, and to get feedback from them about, have we accurately identified the needs? Do the things that we want to do respond to those needs? And frame it in terms of this is about the students and what we need to be doing for the students in order to respond to the effects of the pandemic. And then finally, there's a sort of an overview, broad overview of where the current state is. And I will emphasize, absolutely, it is the current state of thinking about the use of the ESSER 3 funds. As I say, the application essentially, for all intents and purposes, is not ready yet. We don't have any format for inputting specific strategies. So this is just our current thinking about how we might respond, and really comes out of the recovery plan that Deb laid These are the pillars that we're responding to, and recall the pillars are up here in the social emotional learning. 2 is engagement and truancy. 3 is academic achievement and success. So broad area, health, mental health, and behavior supports, including mental health social workers to provide outreach to families, in-school staff to support students, including nursing. Currently thinking of in the order of $600,000 expenditure for that. For pillars 1 and 3, social emotional learning, academic success, extensive summer and after school programming for engagement and academic recovery, summer activities coordinator, outdoor learning support, after school activity coordination. We're really looking to put some time and effort into re-engaging with students in fun and interesting ways this summer, get some academic support in, although really the emphasis is going to be on engagement, and then follow up with that over the next 3 years. And by the way, this is a 3-year initiative. The funds can be spent through June of 2024. And we're really thinking about this as developing over that 3-year period. Support for vulnerable populations, diversity, inclusion, and outreach coordination, regional special education collaborative, evaluation, case manager. So identifying those vulnerable populations, including students on IEPs, 504s, homeless students, migrant students, those groups of students specifically targeted for additional supports in that category, additional staff support and professional development for academic and social emotional learning instruction. This is really how can we make our instruction work so we get, we achieve this vision of all students learning with their peers at grade level in inclusive classrooms. And then finally, wrapping around all of that are, I should say, inclusive and healthy classrooms, because wrapping around all of that are some infrastructure needs that we have, specifically with respect to HVAC improvements that we started, but were not able to complete in the first response to getting things going in the last fall. Some software data management pieces, data security, because if we're going to be gathering more data, which we intend to do, we need to make sure that those data are secure. Data systems development, recovery coordinator. All of that is sort of making the classroom safe and healthy for students so that the things we want to do in terms of inclusion, diversity, and equity can happen. Okay, I talked really fast for a long time, so I'll stop and take questions.
I see Tim and Sean. I just want to reinforce one of the things you said, Paul. This money is available over 3 years,
That's
and we can this can be amended over that period of time. So there's an opportunity to evaluate and identify the things that are working and double down on them, and let go of some things that aren't working and it turned out to not be as effective. So it's really an amazing opportunity for the next 3 years.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Tim and then Sean.
So Paul, could you speak a little more about pillar number 3 that's allocated $3,230,000 for additional staff support?
Sure.
Would these be would these be temporary positions? And what happens if we can't find the staff?
That last question is a great question and really gets back to what Dave said. If we are not able to find the staff that we need to find, in some cases, sort of it is over 3 years, we can delay a little bit, but at some point we might say, you know what, we aren't able to find the staff we need to find. Let's look at the other things that are being successful and support those. As David says, double down on those. So yeah, that's a good question, but we really won't have the answer to that question until we start that, sort of continue with that hiring process. So yeah, that particular piece is, and Deb could probably speak better than I can about this, but it's instructional coaches, professional development in diversity, universal designs for learning, social emotional learning, intervention, additional intervention for students, a pre-K coordinator, because one of the clear pieces of evidence is that if kids are coming in from pre-kindergarten ready to learn, you're so much further ahead of the game, 5-10 years down the road. Those are the kinds of pieces. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but are they temporary positions?
In some cases, the notion is, yeah, we really do need to provide because there's been learning loss, we need to provide the push now, and we won't need those positions subsequently. In other cases, that is still an open question, and it's a great question. To what degree can we, over the long term, do we have an exit strategy for all of those pieces?
Big question. Sean?
Yes.
I was just wondering, it's such a lot of work that you're doing. I really appreciate it, and the compressed timeline that Deb referred to. And I was just kind of wondering, in this whole process, what is the position of the involvement with the current district teaching staff?
I can speak to that a little bit. Some of our conversations in our, so we have a recovery advisory team, right? And on that team, there are 3 teachers from a variety of scenarios, with actually 4, from early childhood, from the high school with an ELL focus, in the middle grades from the middle school. And their involvement at this point has been thinking with us to make sure that we're asking the right questions of teachers. That the next step has really been, because the tricky thing is involving teachers in what, right? Like, until we have a starting point, and with how busy all the teachers were, we've really been trying to be mindful about balancing their involvement in a way that honors the work that they have in front of them now. And so our hope now is that there are leadership councils and the leadership teams in the schools working to, based on the plan we have and the goals we've set, based on our needs, really work in the buildings to cultivate creativity and collaborative ideas around how are they going to do work that relates to these buildings and the goals within their schools. So it will be ongoing. I would almost feel that the teachers are at the beginning of a lot of the collaborative work that they're going to do related to this. And I want to be very clear that it's not going to be this summer.
And I'm sorry to jump in. I actually have to get my kid to a band practice, so I will jump back on as soon as I get to the high school. But I got to scoot right now. If there are questions for me, I'm happy to answer them when I jump back in.
Thank you, Paul. Any other questions from the board for Deb on the ESSER process? Any members of the public have a question? How the process is unfolding, or what the purposes of it are, or anything? I don't see any, so thank you, Deb. That's terrific. And lots to think about, lots to talk about.
Thank you, David.
Okay, so next is, wrong page. Update on community conversations around the school resource officer position. Andy, you want to start some comments on that?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I'm getting reports that there's some tremendous thunder and lightning around in our region, so I'm a little worried that we may lose power. And I know we've got some big work around leadership council, so I'll be brief with my comments to expedite the process, and we can move on to that larger piece of the agenda tonight. So as we were talking, as you recall, the issue of the SRO first came up at the end of February, when was the budget information night. It came up again, and subsequently in March, the determination was made to place this really within the realm of the leadership councils at the secondary schools. But as I've consulted with the handful of our board members present, one of the concerns we have is really the leadership councils are they're a young group, and this is a really, really large task and process to take on, with some heavy duty implications around that level of work. And we, while I taught swim lessons growing up and sometimes might take kids to the deep end in some of their first classes, this isn't always the preferred method to jump into the deep end to teach someone how to swim. And so, and also in thinking about my particular leadership style and talking with Steve and reflecting with both of us, we really do advocate a sense of distributive leadership where we try to seek to bring in others in our decisions. And that caused me to think and reflect upon the nature of the process. And that stemmed me to look at policy. And I know as a board, we're growing in our use of policy and becoming more familiar with it. But policy D3, which we've talked about in creating new positions typically, and that's when that policy tends to come up, that really pertains to the creation of new roles. But policy D3 really lays the responsibility of abolishing positions and not necessarily ripping, but just removing a position outside of the catalog of positions that we have. That places that responsibility on the board to do that level of work. And so I would propose, and David and I, we've chatted a little bit about this. I would propose that this is an issue that the board takes on, and the board can develop some level of a task force to tackle this issue. Really, it's within the board's purview to do this type of work. And I know that there's that dynamic tension back and forth, in terms of what's in governance versus management, and that's a natural tension between superintendents and school boards. But I would suggest that we follow policy on this one, and then I would propose for board discussion that the board tackle this issue.
Thanks, Andy.
And I said I was going to be brief and I wasn't, so I'm sorry, but I do want to, I'm hearing texts from others that their power is flickering, so.
Great, thanks. So Andy shared that decision with me, I think just before the weekend. I'm not really sure when, but and I immediately started to consider what do we do? We're very near the end of the year. We were hoping for some progress on this and for some of the conversations to actually begin. And so I immediately consulted with a group of people who, when this board first formed, I asked for somebody from each town to be available to consult when things came up between meetings. And so I immediately contacted them. That was Anne, Emily, Thomas, and Kelly, and asked for their insights, their thoughts about it. And I also contacted Michaela Sims, our diversity coordinator, and Mike Zostek, our restorative justice coordinator, because I know they are really familiar with the program and with the needs of the kids, that particularly the kids that this program affects. And so I got information and thoughts from all of them, shared a bunch of ideas, and came up with a proposal for a board-based task force. And I'll share that right now. And as you read through it, I'll talk a little bit about the process. So let me see, share screen. I believe this should be it. Yeah, so obviously our primary responsibility is to meet the needs of all children. And this program clearly does meet the needs of many of them. So we're proposing to create a broad task force that with the composition, competence, and support to really engage students in exploring this entire issue. And in order to be really clear about it, along the lines of what Paul just described in terms of using the SMART structure for identifying your goals or your purposes. First, I want to thank Emily for being really clear about the importance of having deliverables, about having really clear goals. And especially the first one, Thomas had a lot of input on in terms of making sure that we're really transparent and in the process of figuring out what to do, and that we really thoroughly integrate the community. He also suggested, and I'm certain that we'll ultimately do this, is to have a report at every public meeting. So there are multiple ways for people to understand what's going on and to be engaged. The second one is to identify students, particularly those who are underengaged, to join the process. And that influenced a lot of the conversation around what kinds of skills or what sort background should people that serve on this task force have? And again, that was Jackie and Kelly for the third one here, examining the current model and researching information nationally to identify positives and negatives. Emily actually mentioned the importance of looking at the national research, but Jackie and Kelly both talked about the importance of having really looking at the value of the program and understanding why so many people are in support of it, and what really the positive things are, which takes us to the next part, which is to get adequate facilitation and support for this task force to develop innovative models for our district that incorporate the positives of SRO programs and eliminate the negatives. And this would be based on the research that they do. And obviously that research will need support. And then the last thing is obviously, because the board is ultimately responsible for deciding this, whether to eliminate a position or to change it. We have to approve changing positions. They would bring a recommendation, or hopefully more than one, to the board, and then the board would have a thorough public engagement, public process about determining what to do. The question of stipends came up, and I think there was broad consensus that people that are doing this work would be serving they're serving the board. It's not part of anybody's job, and they should be stipend. They should get compensation for that. And we've asked our attorney to help us figure out how to make that, how to do that without violating any laws or contracts. We're hoping to begin in August and to set a schedule and identify resources and needs so the work can be done really efficiently, and to report in December in time for budget consideration. It's entirely possible that it'll turn out to be more work, or it'll connect with other questions that need to be explored, and that December is an unrealistic deadline. So that is flexible, but the idea is to have a schedule in place so that the work really progresses and we get some results. And then this part, I think, is again indicative, and I have to again thank Kelly and thank everybody really about the importance of having this be a group of people who are really approachable, really competent, have a mix of skills, but are all based with a really solid focus on students and on student needs, so that there's no political agenda, there's no personal agenda, there's not even a professional agenda outside doing what's best for our kids and making sure we meet the needs of all of our kids, all of our learners. So obviously, obvious members of the diversity coordinator and the restorative justice coordinator, hopefully restorative justice will see a significant increase in development as a result of this process, and talking about the values of a school resource officer. An administrator with demonstrated experience in restorative justice seems really important. Someone from the Community Justice Center, and I think it's probably no secret to anybody that Mel Motel would be the perfect person. I haven't talked to her, so I probably shouldn't even say that. I'm probably putting unnecessary or unfair pressure on her, but somebody who really has organizational skills and can help develop the report. This is not something that school employees or students or school counselors are generally skilled at or trained in. And the report to the board is going to be a really important item. So it needs to be somebody that really knows how to do that and can really help with that process. Obviously, representatives of law enforcement. The social studies department chair was recommended as someone with a particularly valuable skill set and a high degree of respect and trust from the staff. Employees from the transition program who work directly with students would be important to include. Obviously, youth representatives, a social worker. And again, the transition program is playing a large role here because that is a program, and I'm speaking from secondhand because this is information I gathered over the last few days, but that they are involved with some of the students who are most alienated from the school system, and really need a lot of support in terms of engaging with the school. And that's what this program does. And they have experience with the school, using the school resource officer. They see the value of that, and they also clearly understand that it is challenging and intimidating. The person, the symbol is intimidating and frightening for a lot of our students. So they're really people with the right experience and a really balanced perspective. A counselor from the high school, I think, would probably be valuable. and also board members. And Tim, Ann, and Thomas have agreed, and I just had an email from Kelly, and she's also agreed to participate. Tim has a strong background in educational and in education administration, in grant writing and report writing, well, he has all the skills needed to administer, to work through a program like this. Ann has a long experience on the Diversity and Equity Committee and on the UHS board, and is also Ann was a long experience on the BUHS board. Thomas Nolan is the representative from Dummerston. He also is the liaison, the board member on the Leadership Council for the middle school, which is included in the program. And Kelly is the board member on the Leadership Council for the high school, which obviously is included in the program. And she also works in the court system, which I think may give her a broader perspective than many of us have, aside from being a really clear thinker and really articulate in finding the key or the core elements of conversation. So that's the proposal. I've already heard some feedback about how to get started, when will the meeting start, opening it up to input immediately so that people are immediately engaged. And so that's what I'm hoping the board will discuss for the next bit of time, and then we'll open it up to the public and see what we do, or see where we go with this. So I'm going to ask first for comments or questions from the board, and then we'll go to staff and the public. Sean?
Yeah, I just have a question in terms of the timeline. The SRO is on pause for the 2021-22 school year. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. So really, we're talking about a budgetary consideration for 2022-23. Would that be accurate to say?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That was my question. Thank you.
Michelle.
Yep, I just wanted to say that I appreciate this approach to this. I've gotten so much feedback that I think accountability is really important. And as a board member, I have so many questions and desire information. And I think this is a great way to just have as much information as possible so that we can be accountable for any decisions we make moving forward and make the best choice for our school district. So thank you for putting this together. And I see myself supporting this very much.
Thanks, Michelle. Any other questions from the board or comments? The people that spoke with me over the weekend, or anyone else? Okay, the first from the public, Mike Zostak.
Yes, I just wanted to suggest that our people from our security department be included in the list of people on this committee, or this team of people.
Mike, is that actually, do we have I'm not familiar with the security department. That's all I need to know, and whoever.
Yes, there are people in this meeting today who are part of it, and they work very closely with the SRO, so they clearly need to be involved.
Great, thank you, Mike. Keith Lyman.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I think it would go a long ways to invite at least a middle school teacher. There are no middle school. There's only one teacher I see on the list. It's a high school social studies chair. But the SRO covers the middle school, and it'd be great to have at least one teacher part of that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Jillian?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, so I'm coming in with a lot of different thoughts on this and some other things that I want to be able to address. So I'm going to kind of start with some background things before going into this proposal in particular. First, I want to be able to really call for some accountability from the administration of the high school and the local, like the superintendent as well. I didn't exactly appreciate the attempt to portray this decision as something that came from within their own actions and their own thoughts. The way that they were moving forward when we initially, as Youth for Change, because I'm here as a Youth for Change coordinator, so I'm repping them. When we came and brought our concerns about the SRO position to the school board, I know that the school board called for a discussion to be brought to be hosted by Leadership Council. The superintendent and the principal made multiple decisions advancing the process without including a single member from, aside from the chair, without including others within Leadership Council. There was a lack of transparency, there was a lack of accountability, there was a lack of inclusion with the community. And we did not see any attempts from them to shift this. So we brought very briefly our concerns to the Social Justice Committee. And even after that happened, a survey was then released that yet again, Leadership Council had not been informed about. And so I want to put it on here that we want to address that that's not really acceptable, that process itself should have never happened in that way, that we live in a state that is predominantly white. And when we're trying to look at matters that impact BIPOC or marginalized people more than others, you need to make sure that everyone who is most impacted has a seat at the table in every step of the decision-making process. And that is not what was occurring. And so I do appreciate the school board's response right now. And I do appreciate that there's this willingness to move forward in another way, but I don't want us to be doing it without addressing or acknowledging the problems that existed prior. So that is a major thing that I want to put in there. And I honestly feel like I have a lot more I could say on that, but that is not the main focus of this for this time. Right now, regarding this particular proposal, there are aspects of it that I think we appreciate a lot, but also we were just informed of this today. So there are ways in which, even though it does appear that there was more consideration into those concerns that we had about inclusion and equity and centering those most marginalized, I do see elements of that in here, absolutely. And at the same time, this still kind of rush process that's just being brought to us now, and we're being told that this is being voted upon today, is something that's a bit concerning and does still have aspects of it that kind of mirror the concerns that we had around the decision-making process that was happening prior. That said, I do think that we support this. It does seem like something that actually does distribute power and decision-making, which is not the model that was happening before. So we definitely appreciate that. And at the same time, I think there does still need to be some more discussion around this. We have gotten in some suggestions from others who've been doing work around SROs, around and seeing these sort of task force or committees implemented in other districts. So I do have some suggestions I could share with that, but I may try and come back and speak on those since those are not exactly my words, and we may have some other members of Youth for Change who will share those first. But a major thing that we do want to ask is that if you pass this, that you also leave room for amendments in the future so that we can take that time to kind of process what is here and consider how we can include other community members with whom it would be really important to have that sort of representation on this board. And for the youth members in particular, we want to make sure that there's, more than one. I think even 3 would be ideal. That's or more. We just want to make sure that there's more of a balance in this, because a single youth member being present with a bunch of adults and including the SRO, they might not feel quite as comfortable in being able to speak as openly and honestly as they need to be able to really be instrumental in this process. So there's a lot of things that we do feel like still need to be considered. And we really would only feel comfortable with this being approved today if there is that willingness and openness to making amendments should they be needed in the future, so that there is still more room for inclusion and transparency and equity across the board with this process. And it's not just something that didn't include us in any stage of it really, or just in the later stages. It's really important that we're able to be equally represented all across the board. So that is my statement for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Z?
Hi. I just want to start off by saying, like, I am very angry with the way this is going. And specifically, like Andy and Steve, you all are abusing your privilege by power hoarding in this whole process. And there is no reason why there should have been committees and surveys and this task force in the first place at all. That this is just literally feels like you're just diverting the decision because you don't even care about removing the position at all, or even creating a change for the school or the student body. And by doing this survey, like Jillian said, we live in a predominantly white area. That survey, if you don't focus on specific demographics of people within those surveys, you are going to hear from people who are least impacted. And some students in that survey even said, cops don't make me feel safe, quote, fuck cops, Tim's a dumbass. Like their students said things that were relevant to this, and majority, some of them said that they feel protected, and that's real, and that they like to high five Tim in the hallways and blah, 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 blah. But this is not about the individual officer. I wanna say this again. This is not about the individual officer. This is about the system that this officer upholds. Police were designed originally to catch slaves, and still to this day, they marginalize and oppress people of color. And if you are not talking to these people of color that may have experiences or witness these things on TV 24/7 and hear their sides of the story, you are not working towards the student body. You're not creating an environment that is safe for everyone. And this isn't about the individual officer. And if this officer is there to help people with food security and housing and support their families and support them as students, why are they armed? Why do they have a gun? Why do they have a taser and pepper spray and handcuffs and a baton? Why do they have all those things? Some students in that survey said they feel protected if something were to happen. And I'm assuming that's in reference to school shootings. There is literally every single piece of evidence says that SROs do not help school shootings at all. They do not prevent or support students when that is happening. SROs have even left the building in situations of school shootings and have left students dead. There's no evidence that they are keeping anyone safe at the school. And if some students are harmed by this presence, we should have a conversation about this, and we should try suspending the position. And what is the message of safety and security if this person is armed and has these weapons? What is the use of that in a school? What is the purpose of that in a school? And mental health is real. I'm going to say this, mental health is real. And as an alumni, as someone who literally did not struggle with mental health until I stepped into that building, mental health is real. And there is literally there's little to no resources, support, or acknowledgement of the students' mental health within that building. Zero. And these students who are struggling, there's students who are struggling immensely every single day. Students have slit their wrists in the bathrooms. People who struggle with self-harm go to the bathroom and self-harm and leave the bathroom crying with their arms bleeding in the hallways. What message of safety are you sending? Why is there no support around this? There needs to be a replacement of the SRO. This isn't just about removing the SRO. This is about addressing the needs of students. And students do not need an SRO. They need support. They need mental health resources. They need a therapist that is not overbooked, that you can only see once a month for 15 minutes. They need another therapist. They need a mental health responder. They need someone who can respond to them in crisis. They need these things. They do not need an SRO. Some people on that survey had no opinion, didn't know, didn't care, because the school resource officer isn't even integrated into the community enough for some students to even have an opinion or even care or even know who he is. And I'm just saying, rid the SRO of weapons at least, okay? And at maximum, remove him from the school altogether, and in replacement, get someone who's trauma informed and who is a therapist, a mental health worker, a health responder. Get someone who is trained in that way, and even potentially have teachers and staff and administration go through intense trauma informed training, because there is such a lack of transparency around mental health and actual things that students and youth are struggling with on the daily. It's not just about it's individuals showing up in a building and doing work and doing this and doing that. We are humans. We are still humans. We still have home lives that may have, who knows anyone's situation with their home life. There's so many factors and so many ways that students show up on the daily basis at a school that affects the way they learn, that affects the way they engage, that affects everything. And there's no transparency, there's no resources, there's no support for students to openly get help for those things. And that's all I want to say. And I also just want to say that school board, you are the ones who have the final decision. You are the ones who have the privilege to vote on this. And I hope you do what is necessary.
Thank you. We also have the responsibility as a regulated entity to make a motion and agree in public session to move forward on an issue. And many of the things that you talked about, we can't do anything until we decide, until we put a structure and a motion in place and take an action to move on it. So that's what we'll be doing this evening. I've got 3 more people with their hands up. Henry Zucchini was at the top of the list, but he may have had a thunderstorm. He's disappeared. So Gordy Baldwin, and then Shay, and then Jackie, and then we're going to move on.
Hi, Gordy Baldwin here. I'd just like to say that I normally have my last name on here. I don't know why it's not, but I'm Gordy Baldwin, and I work in the safety department of the high school. And I would like to echo the words that Z said. We need a conversation. And I don't believe we have had that. The two other questions I have. Somebody said that the SRO is involved on the committee that on the group that you're planning to have. Is that the sheriff or the SRO?
It says, what the proposal says is law enforcement representatives. It could be somebody from the town, it could be the sheriff, it could be both. It's up to this group to determine.
Okay. And the other thing was the thought exchange and your group. How will they blend it all, or will one over?
I don't believe so. I don't think you can get unless you're working with a really defined group. Putting issues that you can find out what people think, but you can't really get any valid data from that. So I don't see it from using it at all. But
okay, the other thing that I would like to say is that some people have said that the SRO training regimen is not available to them, and it's not something that they know about. And I would just like to say, whether you decide to have the SRO or not, his training is available. His work habits are available to anybody who wants to see them. And his job description is available. I happen to think that he's a valuable resource. And I happen to think that he's a valuable resource because he does his job well. I understand that some people think that this is a position that cannot address in any way the needs of students. But if the quality of the SRO does matter, then the one we have now is an excellent example of what an SRO should be. And up to you what we do with this, but that's my opinion, and I appreciate being able to say it.
Can I just add very quickly? I had my hand up a long time. I just want to get on the list.
There were 2 other people remaining on the list, and then 2 people came after I said we were going to stop. So I'll take the 2 more people so you can speak when I get to you. Based on, I've got a list of people as the hands go up, so I'm taking them in order. But you will be the last speaker, and then we're going to move on. We'll discuss, vote on this, and then we'll move on.
Thank you.
Shay. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I'm on my phone, as you can see, because the internet is very unstable here. My name is Shay Witzberger. I have been listening to people's experiences around policing quite a lot this year as one of the facilitators of the Brattleboro Community Safety Review Project. And one of the relevant roles from that project that pertains to what I'm about to share with you all is that I hosted listening sessions for many different kinds of people in Brattleboro about their experiences with policing, including BIPOC community, LGBTQ+ community that had involvement with the mental health system, and youth. There was a specific listening session for youth. And that experience was, I could write a book later about all the things I learned from that experience, but one of the things that is relevant to this discussion is that many youth of color really named being harmed by police elsewhere as well in the community and in the world, and those experiences carried over to their experience of the SRO program in the school. And one of the most predominant themes that I heard from them was that it's such a white dominant area, demographically that we live in, that their experiences didn't feel valued or weighted enough, because many white students felt chill and happy with having an armed police officer around. That lands really differently for many LGBTQ+ students and youth of color. And so when I was reading, I want to get it really directly to your proposal. When I was reading your proposal, I was grateful to see what you all were working on, and that the power would be distributed more throughout the community than with just the 2 administrators who have been crafting surveys without input and not sharing power with the leadership council as was agreed. And so I think I really hear the frustration from the youth that have spoken tonight that leadership was not sharing power even as agreed. So I'm grateful for the shift in the process. A couple of notes or questions I have are, it says underengaged students, and maybe Dave, you could speak to what that vernacular means precisely to you. What does underengaged mean?
I mean, students that are not regularly in school, they're not always in class, they're not.
Okay, that makes sense. I would add a strong advocacy to add students who demographically are most impacted by policing. I have heard, I'm not related to y'all's project at all, and I have heard from multiple parents of students with disabilities and LGBTQ students, parents of students in the district, that are very worried about sending their students into a school with school resource officers because people with disabilities, LGBTQ+ students, and students of color are most impacted by policing. So if there's space for an edit to include most people most impacted by policing, not just underengaged students, I would really advocate for that. We tried to center that in the community listening that we did, and it was really, really an amazing collaboration because of that effort to center those folks. I also wanted to know if the meetings, as the leadership council meetings I think are open, would the meetings for this new body be open? Would there be minutes? Would it be closed? What's your hope around that?
Yeah, the description talks about the completely open and transparent process.
Awesome.
Any meeting that we sponsor has to be warned, and the minutes have to be recorded and posted, and all the documents have to be available as well. And
I think that's a really great benefit of both the leadership council model that didn't happen and this model, because I think there are a lot of people who are worried, who are not yet included in the data capturing that the admin did, that will want to attend some of those. I want to advocate to include what I think Jillian shared about the process staying emergent and responsive and flexible. I think Deb at the beginning of this meeting about another topic said that only a sort of a inclusive, open, collaborative process can yield the results that you all are hoping for. And this process, I think, is an improvement, but did happen very, very quickly. And I bet you all learn more about what you need as things go forward. So I would hope that you could add some language in there about the process being evolving. And lastly, I want to say that it says law enforcement officers or representatives, and there's no number attached to that. And when I see the makeup of this body, I think that really matters. I imagine just visually, you can close your eyes and imagine, I don't think this is actually going to happen. 10 police officers, 1 student of color, a few teachers, right? And that would be weighted really differently than if there was 1 officer at a time or 2 officers at a time. I think the weight of that body actually is going to be pretty determinant of how safe people will be to share. And I think that there's a lot more community feedback that body can receive once it becomes enacted about how to make people feel safe sharing their experiences and how to center most marginalized voices. But those would be things that I hope you all consider today before you vote. How do you make sure that the police aren't so heavily involved in that process, that they wait so much that people don't feel safe even sharing their fears or their hopes about that? So yeah, I'm grateful that you all are moving toward sharing power. That's a big shift. That's very awesome. So gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you. Jackie?
Thanks, David. And Shay, thank you, because I was going to bring up, a parent had shared with me a point that I wanted to make that we had yet, until you mentioned it, Shay, to talk about having a disability representative on this committee, which we need to do because as we speak about marginalized students who are, disproportionately affected by discipline, certainly persons with disability are a big part of that. So that's really important. But I also want to say to all the people, there's a lot of strong feelings around this, and I hear you and we appreciate you. And perhaps it does seem that the ship seems sort of rushed because we're responding to the urgency, I think, that we were feeling, not me specifically, but just the school in general, from the community. And I know that we're going to be willing to adjust as we go along, and there's learning to do, but I'm just really thankful because I'm not seeing a situation where we've decided this is the way we're going to do it and that's it and that's the end of it. Like, we have responded in the best way we can quickly, and we'll continue to evolve our process and respond. And all of the people that have so many thoughts about this are going to be welcome to all these meetings, and I hope that you will all come and feel comfortable sharing. And I'm just really happy that we're going to move forward in a manner of lots of open discussion, because it's clearly so needed in all of this. So my apologies if we didn't come to this in the manner that feels great to everybody, but I really do believe that we're going to get there and get to a point of mutual understanding among everybody who has different perspectives on this. And it's going to be really exciting. And I just hope we can all I'm just happy that we're moving forward and looking forward. So thanks everybody who's involved in this idea, and I like it.
Thank you. Robin?
Thanks. I actually just wanted to support some of the other comments that have been said, but I also wanted to share a message from Amanda Garces, who is the director of the Human Rights Commission for Vermont. And this is something that I think Jillian was actually going to share earlier, but then she ended up ending her comments, that it's very important. This is kind of what Shay was getting at as well, to be not maybe tonight, but as this discussion evolves about how to form this task force, to be explicit about how many of each kind of person that you named on that list will be on this committee to create something that facilitates the kind of discussion that you want. And that I also think that we can learn from other school districts that have already gone through this process, and that we don't necessarily have to invent everything from scratch. And she had some really good suggestions based on their process that they did in Montpelier about how many students, how many faculty, et cetera. So I would be happy to or Jillian can forward that to the board to see if that might be a stepping off point for forming this.
Thank you. Lissa?
You talk.
Yes.
Oh, no.
Thank you. I just would like to amplify what. Sorry, I thought I was unmuted. I would like to just amplify.
I'm sorry, is this Lissa?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. There was,
Sorry.
it's not the face that I thought I saw that had asked to speak. So go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay, I would just like to amplify what Z and Youth for Change have said. And as a community member and a parent of a future high schooler, I just think it's super, super important to listen to the members of our community who are most impacted by policing and by school resource officers. I really think we need better mental health responders and trauma-informed therapists in the community and in our schools. We need better support systems, not an armed police officer. I don't feel that that is I just don't feel like that is a resource for anyone. This is, to me, this feels like an issue of mismanagement of resources. Like, you know, as a taxpayer and a community member, we want to put our resources to where they are best going to help everyone in our community. And it's super important to just embrace support systems instead of punitive systems. So, and that's just to amplify a lot of what has been said so far. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. Linda, I'm sorry, I thought you were somebody else. So you'll be our last speaker on this topic, and then the board will decide whether we're going to move on this, take action on this or not. You'll need to unmute.
Okay, am I unmuted? Yes, I can see my screen. I just wanted to say I'm Lyndall Bowl. I'm here representing NAACP on their executive committee. We would very much like to be involved in this. We had submitted a statement earlier, and we're very grateful that you're going through this process. But I just wanted to make sure that we were included. We do represent a very striated part of all the community. And we feel very strongly that the students, and particularly the BIPOC students, should be involved in this planning process. But I'm very grateful you're doing it, and we would like to be involved. That's it.
Thank you. I just want to point out that what we're talking about here is creating a process so that all of the views to hear and consider all of the information and all of the opinions and all the concerns that have been expressed this evening. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And the first job of this group is to determine a transparent approach that will integrate the community into the process. So I think that's as specific as I can be about what they're going to be doing. I want to point out that Tim Maceo, Ann Beekman, Thomas Nolan, and Kelly Young have all agreed to help organize this work and get this underway. And Michaela Sims, the diversity coordinator, and Mike Zostak, the restorative justice coordinator, have also volunteered. So they're going to be looking at this video. They're going to be reading these minutes. They're going to be considering all these statements, and they're going to be looking for people to populate this committee. We had several suggestions for more engagement, and I'm certain they will consider all of that. There is always there's a process of amending everything. This motion is to get this started, but the actual carrying out and what happens is up to the group that is formed. If we need to change the motion, if there's something in here that's an obstruction or something in here that allows for a packing of the committee and that happens, then we will take an action. But right now, this is simply to establish the guidelines and a really broadly based group of people with a wide range of competence and experience to begin this work, to undertake this work. So I'm going to ask if the board is, if there are any more comments from the board, would you please raise your hand? Any comments or questions? I'm not seeing any. Are we ready for a motion?
So made.
Okay, well, the motion would be to adopt the WSESD SRO task force proposal as presented. And again, as I said, it's amendable, but that will get this work underway. Is there a second?
Second.
Was that Ann?
It was.
Yes, thank you, Ann. So moved and seconded to accept the proposal as presented. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by unmuting and saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Hearing none, we will move on the agenda. Thank you for your support. And thank you for everybody that gave up their free time on the weekend to help me figure out what to present. Next is committee reports. If we have leadership council or committee reports, I would ask people to be brief because we're going to have a long conversation about the leadership councils as soon as this section is done. Any updates from committees or leadership councils for this evening?
I lost my internet for much of the Green Street meeting, so it will be brief by default, but there was a lot of talk, exciting upcoming projects, reimagining of spaces, new hires, and just excitement around some end of the year celebrations and things of that nature. I'm sure there was more, but then I lost internet, so I know I got the good part.
Thanks, Jackie. Steve?
Good evening. The high school leadership committee, our leadership council met last night for our organizational meeting. We elected Jess Gould as our chairperson and Renee Walliver as our clerk. We had a lot of discussion about what the vision would be. We want to focus on being student-centered, having community engagement, and we all agreed that we see our leadership council as a bridge between parents, students, administrators, and the WSESD board. It's a great group. We're really looking forward to getting some things done this year, and we're really looking forward to the orientation session so we can be more consistent with the other leadership councils in the district.
Great. Thank you. Beth, I know you have 2 new members to approve. So if that's what you're concerned about me forgetting, I didn't yet.
No, I wasn't concerned. I was simply going to give an update that Guilford had met for our first meeting with our new council. And similar to the high school, we talked about goals and objectives and specifically looking at the policy and making sure to pull out the duties spelled out in the policy and organizing a calendar of items to talk about each month to make sure that we hit on everything in the policy. And we also talked about wanting to develop a formal communication method with the school board, potentially in the form of some type of a standard report that we would present in a hard copy via email to you all after each of our meetings so that there would be a record of what we discussed. And that's it from us.
Great, thank you. That actually is part of what we'll be talking about when we talk about shortening meetings. Nancy?
Hi, the Windham Regional Career Center's RAB meeting or RAB board was held last week, and we discussed our recovery plan. We talked a lot about attendance because I had to include a new attendance policy or an updated attendance policy in that. We talked about the need for a greater number of students being out in the community doing work-based learning, and how we're going to address that through the new Perkins grant application. And we also talked about the new electrical program that's starting next year, and a little bit about early childhood education. So anyway, we're moving forward. I'm sorry to say my internet is very unstable, so I hope you could hear this. And thanks for your time.
Great, thank you, Nancy. Kelly.
Hi. The Academy Leadership Council met on June 3rd, and we started working on some of the goals that we created in May. Robin created and shared a purpose statement, which was unanimously adopted for the group. and we started talking about our first goal of increasing membership and engagement with the goal of diversifying the group. And some of the ways we're going to do this are having a table at Welcome Back night, development of a pamphlet talking about ways to be involved in the academy community, and specifically what kind of work the Leadership Council does, as well as our PTO group, which is called ACT. We have a meeting at the end of August to get that all set. And we also spent a little bit of time just starting to brainstorm about ESSER funding and how we would wish to spend any funds allotted directly to the school. And some really great ideas came out of that. Some of them were having some residencies for kids, having people and community partnerships like NECA or other local artists come in to do different activities and series with kids, continuing to purchase outdoor gear and equipment, promoting additional affinity groups to run among our students, expanding after school opportunities, doing an unplugged series for kids to get reacquainted with hobbies that don't include electronics, and working on continuing some field trips out into the community. So it was a great meeting.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. And Ruby.
Hi, Ruby McAdoo, PCS Leadership Council. So I did send just this afternoon a report to the board. That was our year-end kind of year in review report. And so just the really high-level summary is that we spent the last meeting reviewing back, and we did a survey amongst ourselves before the meeting, looking at what the events that we have done and events that we might not have done this year, but are really important to us, that are a reflection of our values. So one of the tasks that's part of that was identified in the Leadership Council policy was to identify values and communicate it back to the board. And so how we chose to interpret that was to look back on what we'd accomplished and the things that we've invested in and done as a school and as the Leadership Council, and have those start to help us with that reflection process rather than surveying our community, which because we all felt like we were all surveyed out. So we started that process, and we have one more meeting in June, and then we're going to take a break for July, and we'll start up again in August. So it was a pretty fruitful discussion, but you know, it's the end of the year is a hard time to focus. so yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Keith?
Yeah, hi. BAM's met on June 2nd, had a good meeting, and most of it, I gave updates on the school year. We have Move Up happening on June 16th, so Wednesday at 6 outdoors. And most of our discussion was on the recovery plan, the ESSER 1, 2, 3 funding. Talked about social emotional needs, truancy, engagement, academics, diversity, equity, and we had some good conversation. That's it.
Thank you. And Tim?
Oak Grove invited Mark Spino and Maureen Gallagher from Green Street School to talk about how their leadership council runs so well at Green Street, because Oak Grove is still considering its structure. And one main topic of discussion is whether the PTO and the leadership council might be joined in back-to-back sessions, since most of the participants in the Oak Grove Leadership Council are also the same ones in the PTO. So there's good, rich discussion on the differences, the different objectives between PTOs and leadership councils. And Oak Grove is moving ahead in defining its leadership council and its structure.
Thank you, Tim. Julianne?
Hi, thank you. So the Dummerston Leadership Council met this past week, and we had a long meeting. We spent some time talking about our Leadership Council in our relationship to the board, which is a continued conversation that we've been having. We also spent some time talking about our final playground plans, as well as ideas for setting up a subcommittee that would work on fundraising and how we would collaborate with community groups and the Dummerston Select Board and the Dummerston Rec to work together on our whole campus, not just the playground, but really the entire campus, because we really want it to be a center for the Dummerston community. There are many ways that the campus can be an accessible place for people who don't feel comfortable, for example, walking on the road. We have a large campus and ability to have things like walking paths for community members. We have a lot of active leagues that use our fields. So it's just a really great opportunity to connect with the town around thinking about our campus and coming together around it. We also talked about recovery planning and ESSER funding, how it's been used in Dummerston so far, and what were people's thoughts about our needs for next year and how that funding might be applied. So thank you.
Great, thank you. One more thing under the leadership councils before we talk about leadership councils is we had 2 additional members join the Guilford Leadership Council, Maggie Foley and Tasha Tillman. Wendy, I'll send those names to you if you don't have them. So we need to approve them, and then we'll answer one structural question about leadership councils before we leave this section of it. So could I have a motion, please, to accept the membership of Maggie Foley and Tasha Tillman to the Guilford Central School Leadership Council?
So moved.
Thank you, Sean. Second, please.
Second, it's Michelle.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the 2 new members are approved. I have a question for Steve, or no, actually for Andy. Andy, how do these get recorded? We had a master list at the last meeting, which we approved, and now we have 2 additions to it. How is this being recorded and updated? Is Barb tracking these? Because I know that we're not. And so we need, I don't know if you have an answer to that or if you want to propose a structure next week or something, but.
Yeah, well, let's think about a structure.
We haven't solved this one yet.
Yeah, let's think about a structure for that one. I would imagine it'll be in the minutes, and then we can ask Barb, once Barb gets the minutes, to add those to the ongoing list that she's keeping.
Great, great. Ruby.
I have one other additional person. You could do it at a different time, but Tara Castine needed to be added to our appointment.
Okay, Tara, T-A-R-A.
Yeah.
Castine, C-A-S-T-I-N-E.
Yep.
To the Putney LC.
Yep.
Okay, could I have a motion to that effect, please?
So moved. This is Ann.
Thank you, Ann. The second?
Second, Jackie.
Thank you, Jackie. Moved and seconded to welcome Tara Castine to the Putney Leadership Council. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, Tara is now a member of the Putney Leadership Council. So we're going to move to the board consideration of progress and challenges after the first year of leadership councils and adjustments going forward. And I sent around a list of questions which was not in any way exhaustive, but and I'm going to put it up. Well, actually, I'll wait for a minute to put it up. There are a bunch of questions that the board is going to need to address. We're not going to do that tonight, clearly. And then there are a bunch of questions that I think would be much more effectively addressed by people who have been in the leadership councils for a while, by members of the leadership councils. So I think what we need to discuss is how are we going to do those two things. The idea of a leadership council, Michelle has mentioned this a bunch of times, Ruby and Robin and now Tim on the leadership, on the communications council have been talking about this, and Ruby's generated a bunch of really excellent questions that would go a long way toward tightening things up. But that idea has been put forward, and then the board is going to have to deal with some of them, because they may need a change in policy, or at least an addendum to the policy, or some other formal change. So let me put these up, and then we're just open to conversation about how shall we deal with all of this. So is that visible?
It is.
Great. Let's see, I've lost my participants list, so I've got to get that back up so I see if people have questions. So now I'd like to just hear board thoughts. I mean, how should we proceed with this? Jackie.
Well, so this isn't in order, but I do have a comment on, what is it? Should leadership council meetings be recorded and posted? Well, no, I don't think they should be recorded, because I think that there's a lot of people that would be reluctant to participate in a meeting knowing that it was going to be recorded. Like, to many people, it can be a little bit prohibitive of sharing your ideas and stuff. And I think we're going to maybe put a limit on the amount of, members that we get when we really want to have like a wide variety of people. I don't think we should record them. Thanks.
Again, I want to ask that that we not necessarily try to answer these tonight, but more try to put together a process for how to come to the answers, because obviously that's one that there's going to be conversation about. There already is. So rather than identify specific comments on these, it's just, how do you, I mean, we can have a subcommittee of the board. We can ask the communications council to schedule a leadership summit, or communicate with the leadership councils to get some input about how to structure that. We can talk about structuring that ourselves. Michelle?
Yeah, so it's a tricky thing to talk about without getting into specifics, but I can say that the Communication Council has been like playing with this for a year. We started talking about having a summit last summer, just because there's a lot of, just because schools have been going at their own pace. They started at different times. They had different ideas going into it. Over and over, clarification, not clarification, like a simple clarification of what the leadership councils are for, so that could be just, included with invitation and Zoom invitation. So every single time a parent or somebody in the community is seeing an agenda, they understand what this leadership council is, and it's not a mystery. That always comes up, and that's just a good starting point. But then that takes us to really working with leadership councils and the board and saying, well, how do you see your role? What do you anticipate this meaning to you? And what does the board want out of leadership councils? So it is kind of a big organizational thing. I have an ongoing list that if it was written in more complete sentences, I would have forwarded it to the board, but I've had an ongoing list of recommendations, both from leadership council development for their own development, as well as how does the board work with leadership councils, and a routine that we might follow, protocols that we might follow. So I think that this is a lot to cover in a board meeting, because all of these questions probably should be answered and discussed to some degree to support their development. I also think that I imagine Andy might want to weigh in, because the policy's been created, and so it falls on his shoulders also to support implementing it. So it is, I think we're seeing leadership councils this year, since this has kind of been the first full year for most schools, we're seeing them figure out who they are and what they want from it. Some schools are still working on recruitment. I know my experience with Dummerston, I'm watching them evolve right in front of me, realizing, geez, how can we engage more people in our community? So they're just sort of naturally developing and finding their own answers to these questions. I'd like to see the board address some, bigger issues like, can we provide stipends for the Leadership Council or for the teachers that are part of it? Is there, so it's really just volunteer otherwise, and it is a commitment. And I know, we think it's important. We know that there were some administrators who are sitting in sort of as chairs just for lack of a volunteer. I think that's probably not the most appropriate thing. And we should, support those schools in trying to have anyone but the administrator. I feel like the administrator and the board member are sort of their own entities within that each leadership council. But yeah, I'm totally open. I do have a big list of different ideas. I think a summit is necessary to, at least with the chairs and any other members who want to participate, especially now that we have a master list and everyone's getting on the same page, just to talk about what's been working in their leadership councils and what hasn't. And I think each school is going to always look a little different, but it shouldn't be because they don't understand their potential or what, the space they have. And I also would just want to see accountability as we follow up with this. If we're going to make a plan that leadership councils are being supported, I'd want to see some kind of accountability in place that they're getting the support they need, and that would be anticipated from their administrators and from whoever else is involved, so that they don't just feel like, that their faces, it's just a, formality that's not actually meaningful. So there's so many things that we could delve into. I know the communication council is, we could talk about this for hours, and we do. And I think a good starting point would be to work collaboratively with chairs and to hear from Andy on what he's thinking, how we help them to develop, and then we nail down some concrete protocols and expectations, what's negotiable, what's not. That should be pretty easy. I think that what's not negotiable is morning meetings and, posting minutes, and what is negotiable is how each school wants to envision their relationship with their administrator and the board. And so that's my 2 cents. I'm not even beginning to cover all of the things. I have a huge list in front of me, and it would just be a lot to read through. It looks a lot like your questions. So I think creating space for us to actually delve into answering some of those questions is probably our best approach moving forward.
Great, thanks. One of the first things you said about sort of what do we want, or what are leadership councils for, is a really good segue to, I asked Christina Naylor to come this evening and talk a little bit about, she was the chair of the board as we did this. She also was the chair when we got the article passed by the district meeting, and was on the policy committee developing the policy, and on the planning, the Act 46 planning committee that also began the process of talking about leadership council. So Christina, are you still awake and with us?
I am. It's been a riveting conversation, and I think has illustrated how leadership councils, when they are fully formed, could really be of service to the community and to the board. So it's been a great meeting to illustrate that. David asked me to just sort of give people a little bit of background on leadership councils. And as I looked back, I realized that I could have given you another ADM, because this started in 2015 with the study committee, when we were looking to figure out how we were going to keep local boots on the ground that were interested in helping serve the schools and get community input. And we realized we weren't going to have as many meetings. So for people that would find it challenging to travel in the evenings to go to meetings, as we didn't envision a pandemic where it's easier to attend, but that there would be a forum to get not just the school community, but the larger community, because the taxpayers do support our schools. So that I think sometimes those are the people that get forgotten in the outreach among other people. So it was a way to keep people who no longer have children in the school or aren't working in the school involved with the school. And also an opportunity to do the forums and the questionnaires. I know in my 3 years on the Dummerston board, we did about 4 different forums and questionnaires of the community as we looked at Act 46 and starting a pre-K. And the other reason the study committee envisioned this was there was just too much work to do. And I think I'm going to be the second one to evoke Deb Cardane's words of the iterative process that's required to understand what the community's goals and visions and needs are, as well as to manage all the different committees that may exist in a school, like food committees and endowment committees and PTOs. So in this way, you could be serving your local school, and if your interest was more in the local community and what was happening in your particular school, it was a great place for people to serve. After 2 years, the Articles of Agreement did not pass. The leadership councils were then worked on as an amendment by the transition board, which I served on for the 3 or 4 months prior to the new WSESD being formed. We thought we had amendments ready to go, and the board decided to take a longer look, and the Policy and Amendment Committee spent the summer really honing in on those leadership councils because we thought they were very important, and we got a lot of community input that they were very important. And so really worked on the amendment that went to the voters in November of 2019 that passed and created leadership councils. So the policy was written in January of 2020 based on the amendment that was passed by the voters in November of 2019. The reason I give you all this background is because we had 3 different sets of lawyers and 3 different batches of public school board members and community members giving us a lot of feedback on the amendments and on the policies. And so I appreciated that Michelle said that warning meetings and posting minutes are non-negotiables, because we've gotten a lot of input from the Secretary of State's office, from various attorneys, that because these leadership councils are meant to advise the board and they're something of a subcommittee of the board, they are subject to open meeting law and should be using Robert's Rules of Order. So if the idea is to be inclusive, if the idea is to make sure that all voices get heard, those are 2 ways that we can assure that happens. So the policy refined what the current laws are on open meeting law with warnings and agendas, that the amendments required that we follow all applicable meetings, but the policy that we wrote was designed to assure that if you're following the policy, you won't run afoul of open meeting law, which board members know can be tricky, and you need to be thinking about what you're doing, and you need to make sure the public is included. And then I would say that things were going pretty well until the pandemic hit, and we were trying to get the policies out to people, and board members were trying to attend the meetings. And then, there was changes in board membership as the pandemic was happening. And I think it has been a loss, another pandemic loss, that we couldn't really get the support leadership councils needed and maybe hone the policy. I'm not wedded to the policy. I'm not on the board anymore, but that we're understanding the legal requirements and supporting the leadership councils to make sure they understand the legal requirements and the intent.
Well, thank you. So I guess with that background, that does address some of the questions in terms of agendas and such. I don't think those are really the hard ones, but we're kind of still at a spot where I think Michelle mentioned that the Communications Council has been talking about this for a long time, and also the importance of chairs being community members, if at all possible, unless there's just nobody that's willing to do it, and having community members be an important part of or crucial part of the summit. I think that that's a place we can start if that committee, if the Communications Council is willing to do that work. And then the other ones, I think we probably could refer to the policy committee to just kind of go through and think about and maybe make recommendations for. Robin's got her hand up, and generally she has a good idea, so I would like to hear that.
One of the things that we have talked about both on the Communications Council and in the Academy School Leadership Council is that despite the fact that these councils supposedly exist in order to advise the board, a lot of the time, the council doesn't really know what the board needs to know about. And a lot of their work ends up being kind of self-contained, of just like talking about decisions that they want to make at their own school amongst themselves. And then the minutes of those meetings are reported to the board, but there's not a habitual seeking of input from these committees by the board. And I think that the board being more intentional about what do you want to know that you need, what do you want to do that you should be seeking the input of the leadership councils on, and have a more regular structure of, like, as you're planning your agendas for each meeting ahead of the time, thinking about what can we send out as questions for the leadership councils to put on their agendas, so that when we are making our decision, we really have the information of the stakeholders on that thing, instead of just hearing about, like, well, we're working on our playground or whatever kind of self-contained discussions are happening. And I actually think that this very list of questions would be a great one to start with. I would really recommend sending the entire list that you had there, David, the general and the LC specific questions, as please discuss this at your next meeting, to all of the leadership councils, and see what kind of feedback you get from them about what they think the answer should be to all of those questions.
That's a fascinating idea. I just want just very quickly, I just want to share one other thing. The policy lays out the business of the Leadership Council. There's a whole list of recommendations that came in the policy. Most of them were also in the article. The last one is responding to requests for information from the Unified Board. It really was intended to guarantee, and Christina addressed this a little bit, but it was really intended to guarantee the uniqueness of the school and have these be driven really by the issues that are coming from the teachers, from the parents, from the community, and the things that the administration is asking for support on, and for the board to be able to take that in, having a board representative there to be able to bring that back to the board. And there are a lot of other things, but none of that, we didn't take the time to clarify that, which is why, part of why we're having this struggle. But I'd love to hear some responses to Robin's idea about having the councils. Obviously, it's not going to happen until the fall, but having the councils address it. It's not like we're in a crisis. We just had a lot of questions and some concerns and some confusion. But that might be a really great way to start. I think the summit was intended to be a little bit more along the lines of how do you recruit people, how do you organize your meetings, what works, what's working, what's not working, those kinds of things. But these broader questions, I think, it really, well, it's an interesting idea. Jackie, bail me out.
Robin, I think it's a perfect idea. Perfect. Thank you.
Ms. Beth and then Michelle. And it's getting to be close to 8 o'clock, so I'd ask people to be brief as they can in their comments, please.
I was just going to say, I think it's a great idea. I think having a specific mechanism for receiving requests from the board to the Leadership Council would be fantastic. And I think putting these questions that you have in front of the Leadership Council is a great suggestion.
Great. I'm going to ask, I see Michelle nodding her head, and I'm going to ask Wendy to, Wendy, when you do the minutes, would you, what Beth just said, would you make sure that and Robin's comments are really almost verbatim, so that that we can look back and see them, because I'm not writing them down, and I don't, and so I just want to make sure we can find these suggestions, because I think going forward.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I have it right and that it includes what you want it to include. What I wrote down was that if the Leadership Council is supposed to advise the board, the Leadership Councils can't do that without the board communicating its needs to the Leadership Councils. There needs to be a regular structure, like allowing them to view upcoming agendas. And Robin had asked you to please send your list of send that list of questions to the Leadership Council, and then a discussion ensued on inter-leadership council and board communications.
Okay, that'll do. That'll do. Yeah, we can.
Okay.
If we need to. I just
All right,
want to make
thanks.
sure that, yeah, we're getting a real clear record. Sorry. Michelle and then Ruby.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'll add to sort of where Robin is at, and just, I want to impress on, I guess, on my fellow board members that our relationship with leadership councils is part of the job. And it's going to also mean more time and effort and work. Some of the things I have listed under how we work with them here, board members should provide an executive summary of current board work and discussion, including policy.
Michelle, I'm really concerned about our time tonight. Those are our details rather than.
It's okay. I won't go into the details, but just to keep like, and ideally though, our chairs would have that list of their leadership council chairs and be sending those policies. And it means adding another layer of people that we're communicating with, and as if they're our right-hand people. I have like 4 or 5 things that were really specific, but it does mean time and effort and that another layer of work. So it's just really important that all of the board members treat this as like part of their job in that relationship, and we're all following the same guidelines of expectations. I guess is the point.
Yeah. And we haven't really articulated those guidelines and expectations, but one of the things is that sometimes it's difficult if a meeting's at 4 o'clock and somebody's working. And that's why one of the questions is, should there be a backup person for each of the leadership councils, which would help with that process. But again, those are things we'll get to. Ruby?
I think Robin's idea is great, and I realize I just said that we're all surveyed out, but I actually think that it would be a really good thing to put into survey form to actually allow all, not just chairs, to bring it to their leadership councils, but for the individual people who've been part of leadership councils or been attending them over the last year to actually answer individually and see what those results are. And I think that could happen now, and see what you get. If you get no responses, you get no responses, and then you take it up later. I would be afraid that if you hand this off to each of the leadership councils and say, discuss, what you're going to get back is going to be a little chaotic and not easy to sift through, because of the nature of all these leadership councils is that they're totally different and they have a different way of approaching things. And so I'd be afraid that you would be you'd get to the end of that process and not have a good meat to kind of chew on. And the only other thing I'd say is that I think that I'm so happy that this board is focusing on this. And I think that one thing as that we've seen, and I've seen as the chair of the Leadership Council, is I'd really love, when you're considering what your expectations are of the leadership councils, to really work on that infrastructural piece of what's the process by which someone is reporting back, what's the not just are there minutes or are there reports, but what's the cycle of it, and even some format for them, or a sample or something to go off of, because particularly if the chair is going to be changing on an annual basis, that's going to be important. So that would be my pitch to you, that I like that there's kind of a broad idea of this is the business that you could choose from. And at the beginning of the year, our leadership council did that. And we said, well, we're not going to focus on those. We're going to focus on these. I like that flexibility, but the infrastructural piece, I think that you don't want flexibility. We as leadership councils want to know what you want to hear from us. That's really key.
Great. Well, the last few comments that we've heard are from members of the Communications Council. So I'm wondering, because it's after 8 and we have a few more things, we can table some of these things to the next meeting because our agenda is going to be very light on the 22nd. But I'm wondering if we want to ask the Communications Council to kind of talk this through and come with a proposal for next steps, whether it's creating a survey and gathering that information or sending it out to everyone, or some of the specifics that Ruby just mentioned obviously need to happen. We're also going to talk about shortening our meetings, which will, I think, require creating a structure for the leadership councils to report in writing. And that may be a template that we want to develop. So anyway, is is the board agreeable to asking the communications, and is the communications council agreeable to coming next meeting with the beginnings, or full blown if you want, but the beginnings of a proposal and a direction and maybe some next steps for addressing these questions and keeping the leadership councils moving forward? Is there, maybe I should ask, is there any objection to that?
I'm on the leadership council and I think that's great. I'm sure that Michelle and Robin do too.
Great. Okay, so yeah, I see Michelle's waving. That's good. Okay, so it looks like it looks like we're good.
I would just want to ensure that we're collaborating with Andy. That's all.
Yeah, yeah, clearly. Yep. Great. Okay, so I'm going to move us on to we sort of did the summit planning, the C6 policy review that we were going to confirm tonight. I was looking through the policies, particularly C7, the next one, which is about board relationship with administrators. It actually talks about the superintendent developing guidelines, and it gives some real clear areas for the guidelines to focus on. So it seemed to me that it didn't make sense to pass a different relationship policy when we have one that we haven't implemented yet. So I've asked Andy to kind of back up and have a look at developing those guidelines. So we're not going to take action on that. Anne has agreed, and as the chair of the policy committee has agreed. So we're going to hold that until we talk about C7. So the next is the board approval of recommended pre-qualified bidders. I am assuming that's with the Academy project. We need to take action. So Frank, would you articulate the action? I neglected to ask you to draft a motion, so I hope you can do it on the fly and it won't be too difficult for Wendy to write it down.
I think Frank may have stepped away. I'm going to send him a text, David. And if
Okay, we can table it for now, and when he comes back, we can deal with it. Okay, next is the Ellen Darrow Scholarship. This is a vote of Putney Scholar. Anne, would you like to address this? Tell us
Sure,
about
Dave.
it. Thank you.
Thank you. The Ellen P. Darrow Scholarship was established many years ago by the generous donation of the Darrow family. It is a scholarship specifically for a student who is a resident of Putney with an emphasis on financial need and or a future plan for agriculture. When we merged, it was decided that the Putney representatives of the board would make determination on the scholarship selected student. And tonight we would ask your approval to present the Ellen P. Darrow Scholarship to Ms. Maggie Fraser Olson.
The Ellen P. Darrow Scholarship to Maggie Fraser Olson.
Yes.
Olsen.
Yes.
Could I have a motion to that effect, please? Or did you just move that, Anne?
I just asked, but I'd be happy to move it.
Oh, please do. All right, we'll just say Anne moved the approval, and it looks like Tim seconded it.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded to approve the Ellen P. Darrow Scholarship Award to Ms. Olson. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we have done that.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Anne. The summer meeting schedule, what I recommend, unless a lot of people are going to be away, is that we not meet in July, because no administrators are going to be around. Hopefully won't be around to meet with us, which would really be nice for them. And the rest of the staff certainly won't be. But that we use the second and fourth Tuesdays in August 10th and 24th, and meet at our regular time, but do little somewhat different things. On August 10th, I'd like us to go over a series of policies that we really haven't oriented ourselves in terms of our policies and our goals, and how the goals of the community are reflected in the policies, and then what we're supposed to be information we're supposed to be receiving and the things that we need to be able to govern effectively and to be aligned with our policies. So I'd like to have that and some goal setting be on August 10th. And then on the 24th, a report on reopening plans and just an upgrade on ESSER, and possibly have EES training. We have to do, federal government requires that Head Start agents like our district have to participate in training. It's about a 90-minute training. And I was thinking that might be the night to do that. It's a regular board night, so people are expecting it. It's the time when everybody's available, unless you're away on vacation. And it is open. It's available for the trainer. Another option would be to have that on a separate time, have the EES training on a separate day. And that could be on Wednesday or Tuesday, the 17th, the meeting between our two meetings. So that would be all we did, and we might be able to do it in less than 3 hours. So that's kind of my, what I'm thinking at this point. I'm not sure. So we need to talk about whether that's going to work and whether that's a reasonable plan. So Michelle.
I'm sorry, David, my internet is so bad today. That's why I have the video off. Could you just repeat those options? You're like freezing on me.
Yeah, it was August 10th.
Okay.
That's the second Tuesday. And that would be to talk about policies and goals. And then August 24th, which is the fourth Tuesday, our regular day, to talk about reopening plans and any progress on ESSER. The application will be in by then. And then the EES, Early Ed Services Training, which would be at 90 minutes on top of those two reports. So that's my initial plan. And if that seems like too much to do in one night, then we could have a separate time, the 17th, for the EES training. Tim? Oh, you just unmuted? Yeah. Okay. Andy?
Yeah, two quick things. One, Frank was able to join back into the meeting. There was a power outage up at his house, but he was able to get back on. And the other, the 10th of August is an admin retreat day. So that's a late night for the admin team. So there won't be any representatives from the SD there because we're out offsite.
We're going to be like doing activities around kind of workshopping. It's, we're going to be able to be in person, and I was thinking we just have some fun, divide up policies and have people talk about them and then explain what they said and talk about what they actually mean. So it wouldn't necessarily it wouldn't matter. We're not going to do anything or conduct any business.
Perfect.
Yeah, Michelle.
Yeah, I'm actually out of the state that week. It sounds like a lot of fun, and you don't have to plan it just around me, but it does sound like a fun get together. But I'm not available the second week of August.
You've seen the policies too. Those are the ones I brought by for the SU to look at.
I have seen them.
Is anyone else not available on those days? Okay, well, we'll go ahead and give those to Barb and get them on the calendar. So we'll go back to board approval of the pre-qualified bidders. And Frank, I'm hoping that I neglected to ask you to prepare a motion. So I hope you can do it on the fly and get it to Wendy and so she can get it into the minutes.
Yeah, actually it's simplified, David. I sent you an email today earlier. Committee is looking for another week to review and follow up on some questions. So we actually won't have a recommendation until the June 22nd meeting.
I saw that was there, but I didn't have time to get to it. No,
okay, yeah.
Sorry to get you out of whatever. Sorry to keep you here just to say that.
Yeah, no problem. We did have a good meeting, and actually one reason why we're needing the extra time is because of the discussion with the Social Justice Committee, looking for more background on diverse work practices, minority-owned firms, those sorts of data points. So that's what we're following up on, and we expect to meet again next week, and we'll have that. But if you could make a note, David, for a
agenda item, same thing, agenda item for June 22nd board meeting.
Great. Yeah. And the best way to be sure that happens is to tell Barb.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great. The next two items are pretty standard every year. We can probably do them together. The first is authorize the Finance Committee to approve warrants and payrolls during the summer months. And the second is to authorize the Personnel Committee to make hiring decisions during the summer months. Since we don't all get together, we need to delegate those responsibilities. So can I have a motion to approve those authorizations as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Sean. Is there a second?
Second. This is
Second,
Ann.
Jackie.
Thank you, Ann. So it's moved and seconded to authorize the Finance Committee to approve warrants and payrolls during the summer and to authorize the Personnel Committee to make hiring decisions during the summer months. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the authorizations are provided.
Can I just get the moves and the seconded again?
It was moved by Sean and seconded by Ann.
Perfect. Thank you.
So we did the EES training. That'll be on the 24th. And I'm gonna make sure I don't forget to tell that to Deb Gass. So the next is the structural adjustments to reduce the length of meetings. And I have a suggestion for immediate implementation of that by tabling that until June 22nd, when we have a very light agenda. And we could have another couple of weeks to give more thought to it. And I consider, if anybody has, actually, there were a couple other suggestions that people sent to me that we can incorporate into the conversation. Or we can talk about it now and decide now. It's at the pleasure of the board.
It sounds wise to me to put it off. Very efficient.
And I will have a motion to table the structural adjustments to reduce meetings item until the 22nd. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ann. And seconded?
That was Thomas.
Oh, thank you, Thomas. I heard Ann too. Okay, great. Great, thank you. And the last one is using hybrid. Oh, we have to vote. I was so far I hadn't forgotten to vote yet, and here I am. Wendy, were you about to remind me?
No, Mr. Chair, I was actually going to ask who seconded that motion. It was unclear.
I believe it was Thomas.
I have that Thomas made the motion. Did I get that wrong?
Michelle seconded it.
Michelle did, thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody.
So I'm still becoming incoherent. So next is using hybrid in-person Zoom format for FY22 meetings. And Jackie has experience in this. So Jackie, would you address that a little bit? And then we'll speak with our attorney to make sure we can do, open meeting law allows it. I think it probably does, but no one that I know of is officially for a municipality or a school district, and certainly not the legislature, has decided yet how to do that. So can you tell us a little bit about it, please?
Yeah, Carrie and I are hoping to try it out at the SU meeting tomorrow night. So basically it just requires 2 laptops. Carrie will still run the meeting, but she will turn her computer to face the entire group so that everybody else on the Zoom can see all of us. I will also bring my laptop, so I'll be in the room, but you'll see my face on the screen so that I can monitor the chat, because she won't be able to do that from the perspective of it seeing everybody. So everybody that wants to be in the meeting can be in the meeting, but most of them remotely. And I've done this a lot and had it really go off, without a hitch many times.
Yeah.
So I believe we're going to test it tomorrow, and it should be magical.
Great. Well, I'm hoping so. One thing you said monitoring the chat. I think you meant monitoring the participation.
Oh, the participation, the raised hands. My apologies.
Great. Thanks.
No chat.
Right. Thank you. So I think that's Tim. Did you have? Oh, Thomas, go ahead.
Yeah, we moved and seconded that previous meeting, but we did motion, but we didn't vote.
Oh, I thought I was going to make it through a meeting without forgetting to vote. Okay, we'll go back to that after we. Tim, did you have something to say about hybrid? No. Okay, I see you're unmuted. I thought you wanted to talk. Okay, so we're gonna, we'll get a report from how this works through the SU and consider using it when we meet in August. And so going back to the tabling of the structural adjustments to reduce length of meetings, we had a motion that was seconded. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 None opposed. We are tabling that item G, new business. And the last item on the agenda is the Ethiopia resolution. I see Alex Beck is here from the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, and one of the many organizations that's working on this. And Tim Maciel is also working as an advocate. And I don't know, at some point we may want to decide we want to have a representative on this organization. Well, tell us a little bit about the organization, and then Tim, if you would share the resolution, and then we'll talk about it and hopefully have a vote.
Do you have the resolution to post on the?
I can. I thought I was thinking you would let me. Yeah, I have it right here. Wendy has a question first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this going under new business?
Yeah, this was added to new business at the beginning of the meeting.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and Alex, I'm so glad that you can join us. So why don't you tell us where we're going with the Ethiopian?
Yeah, let's do that, and then I'll put it up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, folks. So the BDCC has been leading an initiative that we call the Welcoming Communities Project. And over the last 2 years, we've been working on making our community more inclusive, mainly from the workforce development standpoint. That's what role the BDCC takes. We're, our co-chairs of the Diverse Workforce Development Committee, and have really identified that immigration is really important to the vibrancy of our communities and our economies. We need more students and we need more volunteers. And so this is something we've been doing our research on and building a partnership for almost 2 years now. And so we have a team of folks from World Learning and the Planning Commission, Public Transportation, CASP, the Community Asylum Seekers Project, which is an asylee support group. And so we've really been working over the last 2 years really to see what it would take to become a refugee resettlement community. And so we were introduced to the Ethiopian Community Development Council, which is a national refugee resettlement organization. And as you know, the facilitators of the Working Communities and Welcoming Communities Project, we kind of are helping facilitate their community engagement process. And really helping them understand the work we've been doing in considering Brattleboro as a refugee resettlement community. So that's a long story in saying that there's a team of us here in Brattleboro who are working with the ECDC, the Ethiopian Community Development Council, for them to designate Brattleboro a refugee resettlement community. They would, in theory, resettle up to 75 individuals a year at most, but what is perhaps most exciting to us is they take a community sponsorship approach, which means it is really based on the fit in the community. They're paired much more closely with resources. It's a ground up approach to refugee resettlement that we think kind of fits the way we do things here in our community. So part of this and the reason why we invited Tim to a meeting last week is really just to show that it's a community effort. And so we're seeking letters of support from really all stakeholders, folks from the state public health to public transit. World Learning, again, are really big leaders in this. And of course, the young people who may be coming would be students in our schools. And so that's a really exciting prospect, but it's also really important just to be communicative about that possibility. And of course, supporting it is really the first step in becoming a welcoming community. So yeah, I'd be happy to answer as much information as I can. There's questions.
Thanks, Alex. And Tim, you had, I don't know if you're kind of late to ask you this question, but you had articulated a few things about this community, particularly the school community, that would made it a particularly good, or seemed like a really good fit. Would you want
Sure.
The board has seen that, and I think you sent an email.
Well, I hope Nancy Weiss is still on. Today I was talking with Alex. He mentioned something important. BDCC does, BDCC does empirical research on the need for workers in the area. What Alex told me today was if 100% of BUHS students stayed in the area and were fully employed, there would still be a need for workers in this area, in areas such as manufacturing, education, state employee jobs, service industry. So there's a real need in this area for workers, but that's not what really motivated me. Thinking of the school district, it's unquestionable that our schools would benefit from the diversity that the children of refugees would bring to those schools. And our schools are very well positioned to serve them well. We have an emphasis on project-based learning, on outdoor education, which lends itself very well to second language learners. We have embedded ELL teachers in the system. As I mentioned, we have the Career Center. Our schools would benefit, the refugees would benefit. This is definitely a win-win situation. I think that the more that we can support EDCC and their goals of getting the US State Department to agree that we are superbly positioned to accept more refugees, the better. This started with a plea from a proposal from Governor Scott to triple the number of refugees in the state. And then Senator Leahy mentioned the humanitarian need, humanitarian purpose. And we see, I think the board sees very well the educational benefit to refugees and to the schools. So if anybody has any questions, I hope that the resolution is self-explanatory. Do you want to put it up?
Yeah.
I'm not going to read it. You can just read it silently. It's pretty.
So one thing, I think the acronyms may have been swapped. So just for it's confusing for us too. But I think one thing we want to be clear is that it's the Ethiopian Community Development Council are the folks who will be doing this work. Again, with a BDCC, we are helping organize a lot of the community support. But so I think in the second paragraph, the one below this, it's just replacing the BDCC here with the Ethiopian Community Development Council.
Right. Okay. That makes good sense.
And so I will send a copy of this to, well, if we approve it, I'll send a copy of this to Wendy. Well, I'll send it anyway. And with it, and she'll note that change. So we're voting on the what you just described, the council, rather the Ethiopian Community Development Council's work, not the BDCC.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes, Wendy.
Would you like the entire wording of the resolution, including the amendment that Alex Beck just mentioned, would you like that included in the minutes?
Well, I think, let's see. The document will get posted with the minutes.
Okay.
If you can edit PDFs, feel free to edit and do it yourself. I think I'll send it to Barb and ask her to make that.
Yeah, I cannot edit PDFs with the program that I have.
That's why I asked. So I will send it to Barb and And it's the Ethiopian development, it's the committees, not BDCC. So.
And so she'll attach it to the minutes then?
Yeah, and she'll post it with the minutes.
All right, great, thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out. Sean?
Yeah, hey, I think this is great. And I think Alex and Tim both mentioned community. And I think that it's in some ways a Brattleboro-based initiative. And I would just like to say it's really a good opportunity for the other 3 towns in the WSESD to come on board. And it will be, the WSESD is a much broader, wider community. And I'll be proud to vote for this. So thank you.
That's a really good point, Sean. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Do we need to see the letter again before voting? Emily?
Thanks, David. So I guess I missed the first little part. I had to step away, so I'm not sure. Did we already hear from Andy about this? Because I know when I had talked to Tim actually earlier when I saw his email come in about this resolution tonight, and he had mentioned that there was a meeting. I don't know if BDCC held it or who exactly, but that Andy was unable to make it. So I guess I kind of wondered, did Andy or Andy have any thoughts on this? Because obviously some of it would be students matriculating into the schools and the services involved in that.
Yes. Andy?
So Alex and I had a brief conversation after the RAB meeting last week. I was not able to make the meeting the meeting that was just held on the topic. But this is a strategy that was pursued up in Rutland City when Rutland was looking, they brought in a number of Syrian refugees, and a lot of it was a humanitarian initiative. But there was also, as Tim was pointing out, an economic impetus behind that as well. When we look at the number of people in our area to continue to allow our economy to thrive and our businesses to operate, it is a win-win situation for everyone. So I think this is absolutely something the school system supports and would be behind wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Any other questions? Let me just make sure I don't drop that. Okay. Could I have a motion, please, to adopt the letter as presented? Do people want to see it again?
With the modification.
Yeah, with the modification, yes, the amendment as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Sean. Is there a second?
Second, this is Ann.
Thank you, Ann. Moved and seconded to adopt the Ethiopian Refugee Resettlement Program resolution. So moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
I abstain.
The motion is passed. That's the end of our agenda. Andy, do we need an executive session this evening?
No, we do not.
Okay. I would, let's see. Bethany, I see your hand up.
Yes, hi, thanks for calling on me. I had 2 things. One, I wanted to just offer thanks where it's due, and I hope Andy Skarzinski is still on here, and just say that I think yesterday's call for the early release with the heat was well warranted, and I'm appreciative of the consideration for small bodies with masks on their faces not having to be at risk of illness as a result of being in really hot buildings. So just thanks for that. And then the other thing I wanted to just say is I've heard a lot of conversation this evening and also in the past few meetings about the ESSER funds and schools really focusing on things like after school activities and enrichment. And I wanted to just throw out there that so I run the YSFire program after school at Academy School that's run through Meeting Waters YMCA. I just wanted to give a couple of very quick points about that so that it can be considered and also ask that perhaps we have not necessarily a seat at the table, but at least a consideration when there's conversation about after school activities. We have the ability to complement the ESSER funding plans really well and also meet an essential childcare need for families. We've worked with the existing after school activities at all of the different area schools. And so we're able to accommodate that and additional childcare afterwards. We run on full days and early release days. So we have a model for both of those that can be easily shared and incorporated or somehow worked with what's going on for our schools looking to add additional activities and curriculum. We also have the option of running care until 6 p.m. at night, which most after school programming doesn't do, but we have the ability to either offer how that model works or to run in conjunction with what's going on. And I feel like that's a really important thing for a lot of working families. We have scholarships and subsidies available. We have a sustainable business model that's not grant dependent. So right now there's, it's fantastic that there's this ability to do this, this money, but also in just looking forward, it might be good if you wanted to pick our brains on how do we run an after school enrichment program that doesn't require grant money. So it can continue past the end of any grant funding. We were brought to Brattleboro by the request of the parents and the principals. Originally, we've been running in the schools for 23 years now. And currently only 2 have indicated that they'll welcome us back for next year so far. So we're hoping that the others will, because we know that there's an extreme need for care from parents and for their kids. And the thing that I also want to point out too is that any after school programming, specifically those like the WSESU programming, offers a direct and strong daily connection to families and parents that I don't know that can be matched anywhere else within the school. And that is not in any way a knock on any of the school, but I see a series of between 15 and 20 different families and directly communicate with the parents of my students in my program every single day. And many of them will say that I'm the face of the school for them, that I'm the only person they really talk to, because it's not as easy to get in touch with the teachers or to talk directly with them in, a regular way. I consider myself lucky that I know the school and the area as well as I do, and that I have the ability to share resources or to make connections with the teachers in the schools. But I would absolutely love it if we could be seen as both a resource and somebody who could be maybe invited to the conversation, so that we can see ways that we could collaborate, ways that we could work together, ways that you could pick our brains on things that we do that work really well in the model that we have. Just sort of deepening the opportunity for after school activities and enrichment and curriculum in a way that also looks at not just how do we educate and make activities for kids, but how do we connect to families and different agencies in the area as a result of having kids there for that much longer. So that was a little bit long. Thank you for hearing me out. I just want to put out there, as we're talking about after school activities, that I know there's some great ones that have been run at different schools. We are one that I don't want to get overlooked, even though we're not specifically school district and we're run by a different organization. I think it's really important that we stay at the forefront of any conversations of that, since we have been doing it for so long. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethany. Would you hang on just for a second? Deb, when the list of community organizations that you presented tonight, when you were talking about the planning, is WSESU included in that? Or should it be?
Yeah, I think it likely should. And I think it's also a great suggestion to think about. I mean, after school programming and summer programming is one big area that we want to delve deeply into. So
yeah, and given
we've got 2 lists.
Given the difficulty of getting people to run programs or participate in programs, and how the size of the need, it seems like everything that's offered, particularly a quality program like that, would really be great to be involved. And just Bethany, I think you're probably aware, because you're at a lot of meetings, that this board is clearly committed to being engaged with the community and having as much interaction and engagement with community organizations and community services and community projects, like whether it's the youth theater or the museum or Beak. or why aspire? You know, it really is something that we see as extremely important. And so I'm sure there'll be a pretty favorable response to your suggestions, especially the experience of how to do it once the money's gone. So I don't have to tell you, I don't have to tell you to stay in touch, stay tuned.
You don't have to tell me to stay in touch either, because I'm pretty good at that too, David. And you're right, I do appreciate it, and I do see that. And Deb, thank you. I would love to have more conversation. I also am happy to pass on Sue Fortier as the director at Meeting Waters YMCA, and she has way more ability to have the conversations on a bigger level. I'm happy to, chat about what happens at the actual Aspire. I do also, I want to just give a little shout out to Kelly Diaz, who has was the only school in the district who welcomed us back this year to have our after school program. And that has been phenomenal. We've had a really successful, strong program there. The kids and the families have been ecstatic to be back and have time together after school. We've been super safe. And like I said, I'm really hoping that now that we're getting somewhat back to normal, that we can become, a strong partner with the schools again, but especially as we're talking about after school activities would be fantastic. And if people don't have a concept of what we do in Aspire, again, I'm really happy to have a conversation about it, because we're very much focused on character education in general, homework assistance and whatnot. And it's a pretty well-rounded and full program. So anyways, I just wanted to throw that plug out. And Deb, I'm happy to touch base, or if you want, you can just contact the Meeting Waters YMCA and talk to Sue. Either one is perfect.
Yeah, and we are in touch with Sue as well. So thanks, Bethany. That's awesome.
Great, thank you. Any other business? I'd like to ask the board for a personal favor to stay around for just a couple of minutes after all our visitors, non-board members, Andy too, please, just for a couple of minutes for something personal I'd like to share with the board. It's not school business, but since we're all here, and it won't be an illegal meeting. Wendy?
David, do you want me to stick around for that, or no? I won't be offended either way.
No, thanks.
Okay, sure.
So could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Mr. Chair, there being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Seconded, Thomas.
Thank you, Thomas. Moved and seconded that we adjourn at 8:40 p.m. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned.